It's Thursday, March 31, 2022. In the headlines, Prime Minister Andrew Holness meets with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. Minister Clark explains the need to reform compensation in the public sector. Regionally, illegal guns is still a major concern for the Barbados Police Service. And in sports, Reggae Boyz win 2-1 over Honduras. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Simone Absalom Gill. Jamaica will receive $30 million from the United States to help strengthen the country's public health, security, and economy. The announcement was made following a meeting between Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, at the White House on Wednesday.
The United States, and I am announcing today, will be investing $20 million to assist in the strengthening and the expansion of Jamaica's commerce, in a way that we fully intend will have an impact in strengthening the economy of Jamaica and drive economic growth.
Vice President Harris says the priority is on youth, with a strong focus on at-risk youth.
We are announcing now to provide $10 million to target at-risk youth in Jamaica through a number of initiatives that we believe will have exponential impact not only on the issue of crime prevention, but what we intend as well, which is to strengthen, as you have described, the natural human capital that exists in Jamaica among young people.
Harris, in brief remarks during a photo opportunity with reporters, noted her Jamaican descent and trips to the country in her childhood years as she welcomed Mr. Holness. Prime Minister Holness took the opportunity to highlight what her ascension to the post of Vice President means for the women of the Caribbean.
You have been a source of inspiration and great pride for many Caribbean people, in particular our young women in the region. And we are indeed seeing an increase in the political participation of young women, and this diversity in the political space will augur well for the region.
Mr. Holness shared that both countries must address the vulnerabilities that have been exposed because of the pandemic and other global developments.
In this regard, growth, infrastructure, human development, national security, and as noted, energy security are areas of priority. We believe these areas also coincide with the United States' interests in ensuring that the region is secure, peaceful, stable, and prosperous. We have presented an overall plan to secure Jamaica's prosperity and growth and have provided an outline on how our focused partnership with the U.S. can deliver on the promise of the great future that Jamaica envisions, particularly as we herald in our 60th year of independence.
Mr. Holness reaffirms Jamaica's support in redoubling efforts in tackling the illegal trafficking of weapons and persons, lottery scams, and other transnational crimes.
To address this in a decisive way, we are seeking to foster increased partnerships and collaboration on information and intelligence sharing, extradition, and other law enforcement efforts.
Wednesday's meeting commemorates the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the countries. The Prime Minister is expected to meet with other high-level U.S. government officials, as well as have discussions with the diaspora before returning to Jamaica on April 3. For the news, I'm Carla Thomas Hewitt.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says he will be discussing possible partnerships in renewable energy, trade, and investment during his working visit to Washington, D.C., United States. He says the visit is also aimed at reaffirming Jamaica's long-standing relationship with the U.S. in areas such as culture and security. He shared his plan during a television interview on the Great Day Washington morning show.
We want to talk about specific things such as security. There are issues within the region which we want to have our face-to-face and direct discussions on particularly the inflow of illegal weapons into Jamaica, and how we can work together to address that. And on the other side, to deal with issues of lottery scamming and so forth, which affects the United States heavily.
He also addressed questions regarding Jamaica's political future as it relates to calls for Jamaica to become a republic.
It is clear that there is an emerging sentiment in the country regarding what should be the organization of our state. And what we have done, our government, is to start that process. So it will eventually be, from everything that we've seen, from the opinion polls to what our leading opinion makers have been saying, and my own personal view, is that Jamaica will eventually become a republic, and we have started the process and the journey towards that.
Discussions on climate change are also on the agenda.
Jamaica has lovely beaches, small islands have lovely beaches, but there is an economy, and we are trying very hard to grow our economy, support our people, and contribute to the world.
The Prime Minister is expected to return to the island on April 3, 2022. During his absence, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Jang, will be in charge of government. Today, Thursday, March 31, is the deadline to register to be on the next voters list. The list is scheduled to be published on May 31, 2022. The Electoral Office of Jamaica says persons intending to have their name added to the voters list must apply in person at any EOJ constituency office. Individuals who register after March 31 will have to wait to be added to the November 30 list. Electors who meet the March 31 deadline should expect to receive their voters' identification card by mid-June. The EOJ says the registration process is simple and applicants are asked to come prepared to have their photographs and fingerprints taken. Following the application process, each applicant's residence must be verified to complete the registration process. To be eligible for registration, applicants must be Jamaican or Commonwealth citizens, ordinarily resident in Jamaica for at least 12 continuous months, and must be 18 years of age. The public sector compensation is woefully complex and inefficient, and it's in need of reform. So says the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark. He says because of this, the government is unable to retain and attract talent to run the public bureaucracy.
Because, pay is just has been subdued for a long time. The way in which compensation is organized is too complex, and it makes it unfair and inequitable. We have instances where persons are, as I said before, unaware of their total compensation because so much of it is caught up in allowances. The big problem with allowances is that when you retire, your pension is based on your salary, which in some cases can be a very small proportion of your total income.
He shared that for such a small country, having 185 different allowances is way too much. He explained the current structure. If someone's salary is based mostly on allowances, it can affect the person either positively or negatively. He stressed that the government must move to a position where the total compensation is your salary. Minister Clark also took issue with the pay scale system currently implemented in the public sector.
We have 325 grades in the public sector, for example. As I mentioned in my budget presentation, a country like the UK, which is 20 times our size in terms of its population, and maybe 200 times our size in terms of the size of the economy, that's just an estimate. They have 7 grades in their public sector, 7 pay scales, 7. And we have 325.
While we understand everyone is hurting by the current rise in gas prices, the government must focus on the most vulnerable. This point was made by Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark.
Governments, when they intervene in times of crisis using taxpayer funds, the government, for a caring society, for us to have a caring and progressive society, you want to make sure that that intervention is targeted to those who need it most. And that's not to say that you don't have a need or I don't have a need, but we have to recognize that there are hundreds of thousands of people, not 10,000, hundreds of thousands, several 100,000 who need it more than you. So I hear you that you're hurting, and I understand, okay? All we're trying to do is to, target the 500,000 households that might be hurting a little bit more than you.
He explained why taxi operators were targeted for the gas allowances and the newly announced JPS copay plan.
The persons who take public transportation are probably 3 times as many as the persons who are fortunate enough to have a car. And those persons who take public transportation are at the mercy of operators who feel they need to increase prices, right? So we are intervening using a philosophy and a model that we want to prioritize
the most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable, of which we're talking several 100,000, right? If you took 500,000 people in who would benefit from the JPS copay, and each household has 3 to 4 persons, you're talking about 1.5 to 2 million people.
Dr. Clark was speaking on the weekly news and current affairs show PBCJ Presents, which airs Fridays at 5:30 p.m. and on all our social media channels. Let's find out how local and regional markets are performing from our business reporter, Danita Rodney.
In foreign exchange trading for Wednesday, March 30, the US dollar sold for an average of $154.12. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $124.22. The pound sterling traded for $202.82, and the euro sold for an average of $172.94. The following reflects the movement of the JSE indices in Wednesday's trading session. The JSE index advanced by 3,384 points to close at over 300,000 units. The junior market index declined by 65 points to close at over 4,000 units. The combined market index advanced by 2,582 points to close at over 300,000 units. And the All Jamaican Composite Index advanced by 4,746 points to close at over 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 102 stocks, of which 50 advanced, 32 declined, and 20 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Variable Preference, Barita Investments Limited, and Berger Paints Jamaica Limited. Stocks declined for Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited, Siboney Group Limited, and Derrimon Trading Company Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 1834 Investments Limited, and Access Financial Services Limited. Spirtree Spices Jamaica Limited was the volume leader with over 57 million units, followed by Wigton Windfarm Limited ordinary shares with over 8 million units and Edufocal Limited with over 4 million units. In regional stocks, on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, Clicker Investment Fund was the volume leader with over 26,000 shares, followed by Calypso Macro Index Fund with 700 shares being traded. The Barbados Stock Exchange saw Goddard Enterprises Limited as the sole security trading 92 shares. Studies are being undertaken into the potential of using wind energy in the northeast and east of Trinidad, the development of hydrogen, and the clean use of ammonia and methanol. This is according to Minister of Energy, Stuart Young. He noted that the U.S. government had plans to release funding for the development in the areas of climate adaptation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy in its national budget. More from TTT Live.
Speaking during a meeting on Tuesday with Barbara Feinstein, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. State Department for Caribbean Affairs and Haiti, she noted that the U.S. government had plans to release funding for the development in the areas of climate adaptation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy in its national budget. In another meeting with Wellington Dario Ben Cosme Castanos, ambassador of the Dominican Republic, Both parties discussed the desire to sign an air service agreement, which has the potential to introduce the opportunity for direct transit to and from the two countries. Minister Young also received a courtesy call from Ambassador of the French Republic, Didier Chabert, who expressed the desire to have deeper regional ties with CARICOM.
In market data for oil prices plunged on Thursday on news that the United States was considering a 180 million barrel release from its strategic petroleum reserve, the largest in the near 50-year history of the SPR. Brent crude fell $6.95 or 6.13% to $106.50 a barrel, and West Texas Intermediate futures fell $7.28 or 6.75% to $100.54 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Denida Rodney.
In regional news, St. Lucia on Tuesday signaled its intention to become the 5th CARICOM country to have full membership of the Trinidad and Tobago-based Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ. The CCJ was established back in 2001 to replace the London-based Privy Council as the region's final court.
My government is committed to addressing our destiny as an independent nation, both tacitly and tangibly. This year, St. Lucia will take steps towards the accession to the appellate jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. We are thus expected to become the 5th CARICOM member state to replace the Privy Council with the CCJ.
Mr. Charles said the Philip J. Pierre administration, which enjoys a 13-4 majority in the parliament, has appointed a committee under the chairmanship of former CCJ President Sir Dennis Byron to prepare the way for St. Lucia's ascension to the court. The court also settles disputes between CARICOM member states concerning the interpretation and application of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, the agreement that established the Caribbean Community and Common Market. The CCJ is currently presided over by 7 judges, including the president of the court. These judges are qualified legal practitioners from the Caribbean region and the Commonwealth. Currently, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, and Guyana are the only full members of the CCJ. Jamaica is still yet to make the step, although a vote was taken in 2015 to make such a move. In the Bahamas, Acting Director of Public Prosecution Franklin Williams is under fire after comments he made about a 4-year plea deal his office agreed to in a case involving a 40-year-old man who admitted to having unlawful sex with a 14-year-old schoolgirl while she was in uniform. He said, quote, "We have a generation of highly sexualized young people who in some cases lack parental guidance," end quote. Jared Higgs has that full story.
Our News reached out to Williams for comment on the case that saw 40-year-old Justin Pratt jailed for 4 years after admitting to having unlawful sex with and impregnating a 14-year-old girl at his Shamrock Close home. Williams was asked how he responded to criticism that the 4-year sentence was too lenient. He wrote back, "We have a generation of highly sexualized young people, whether through media or association, and who, because of parental inattention, lack of parental oversight, and in some cases, tacit encouragement and acquiescence, engage in risky behaviors. The facts of this case dictated the course taken." Williams' comments were met with sharp rebuke by many who accused him of victim blaming.
You cannot blame the victim for what has happened. And a 14-year-old girl is to be protected under Section 11, not thrown under the bus, as it seems to have been done.
Attorney and gender rights activist Marion Bethel expressed shock at the comments and questioned how a 4-year sentence was agreed to when Section 11 of the Sexual Offences Act specifically protects girls between the ages of 14 and 16. That section also sets out a maximum punishment of life imprisonment.
Section 11.2 gives a defense for a person who's 21 and under. A 40-year-old does not have a defense under this Section 11. So I don't see I don't know the full facts of this case, but I don't see I don't know of any mitigating circumstances that would call for the kind of penalty that this person has gotten.
In this case, police went to the 40-year-old's apartment back in January 2020 after an anonymous tip from a neighbor. When officers were outside the apartment, they heard sex noises coming from the inside. The child, who was putting on her uniform when police arrived, was taken to PMH, where her pregnancy was confirmed. She told police that she met the man on Facebook.
To speak of highly sexualized as a mitigating circumstance, it doesn't sound fair and just to me.
Hundreds expressed outrage on social media, with many calling for Williams to be fired. Bethel says she isn't calling for him to lose his job, but she does think he and others need more training.
Across the board, law enforcement agents, the judiciary, prosecutors, all could benefit hugely from understanding gender stereotypes and myths about young women and girls.
Barbados recorded a significant reduction in serious crimes in 2021. However, illegal guns are still a major concern of the Barbados Police Service. Aliyah Briggs from CBC News has that story.
Despite recording a 23.8% reduction in crime in 2021, the presence of illegal firearms in Barbados remains a major challenge for the police. This is according to Police Commissioner Richard Boyz, as he reviewed 2021 at the Barbados Police Service's annual Grand Conference.
There was a 22% reduction in murders, from 41 in 2020 to 32 in 2021. Another 32 murders committed, 17 or 53.1% were enabled with the use of a firearm. Border security challenges also attracted our attention, as 56 firearms and 759 rounds of ammunition of various calibers were recovered in 2021.
Attorney General Dale Marshall says he is pleased with the reduction in serious and firearm-related crimes. Despite this, he says the war against illicit firearms has not yet been won.
The scale of the problem of illicit firearms. This has been a persistent problem which has been graphically highlighted by the images recently carried in the media. Secondly, the work of the Barbados Police Service. I am aware that you have identified the suppression of firearm crime as a priority in your crime plan. And while I unreservedly commend you for your efforts, but be that as it may, the battle has not yet been won.
The Attorney General says addressing firearm crimes is a complex issue that requires a multifaceted approach.
These interventions will, as a consequence, need to go far beyond the efforts by the Barbados Police Service and must include a whole-of-government approach to protect and promote community empowerment and community ownership of the interventions that are required. And we've been taking concrete steps. For example, through the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment, a program has started of installing lights across many more playing fields in the island, and through the creation of mini stadia at several locations. And I don't think I have to tell you what a positive impact sporting activity can have on the young people in our communities.
The two-day conference is being attended by the ranks of the Barbados Police Service and key stakeholders to discuss and refine their policing plans and improve results for this coming financial year. Aliyah Briggs, CBC News.
In Antigua, the Directorate of Gender Affairs says there has been an increase in the number of men seeking advice as victims of gender-based violence. Purcell Charles Jr. has the details.
More men across this country have been seeking reprieve from gender-based violence and domestic abuse. The revelation has come from Acting Director of the Directorate of Gender Affairs, Jamie Saunders.
Between 2020 and 2021, we saw an increase in reporting for men, whereas it went from 6% to 14%. And that was kind of the start for us to do some more interventions geared towards men.
The number of reports has dwindled since 2019 overall, but in each of the years, most of the reports continued to come from women.
In 2019, we had 173 reports of gender-based violence. In 2020, which was the year we had the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually saw a decrease where we had 128 reported, and in both of those years, it was around 90 to 93% of women predominantly making up the reports. And last year, 2021, it was another decrease where we had 123.
Saunders is making the appeal for anyone who's a victim to contact the Support and Referral Center.
You can call our national hotline, which is 24 hours, and the number for that is 463-5555. You can also walk in directly to the office between 8 to 4:30, or you can call 911, the police, and at any time we would mobilize and have the ability to utilize the center to ensure that the one-stop approach is still being used.
Saunders appeared as a guest on Wednesday's edition of Antigua Barbuda Today. For ABS News, I am Ursula Charles Jr.
In Guyana, Chairman of the Trading and Investment Committee, Ramesh Duku, is accusing some private companies in the region of manipulating the local continent laws of Guyana to suit themselves. Gordon Mosley has that story.
During a presentation at the luncheon of the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association yesterday, Mr. Duku said some Trinidadian companies operating in Guyana have been trying to find ways to circumvent the recently passed local content laws for the oil and gas sector to best suit them.
We are here to embrace you on our terms. Don't be disrespectful of us. Don't be disrespectful of our laws. You have some more deadly local content laws than we have. And already we're seeing foreign companies making to their staff members shareholders in the company and doing other things, other manipulative things to qualify for the local content register.
The local content legislation is geared towards giving Guyanese companies and Guyanese more opportunities and preferential opportunities in the oil and gas sector. It sets out a number of requirements for companies to qualify to be registered for opportunities in the gas sector. Mr. Duku said there must be greater investigation of those companies registering for local content in Guyana.
The authority given to the local content secretariat has to be deeper. It has to be associated with the Companies Act of Guyana, and they must have more authority to investigate companies.
Some businesses in the region have raised concern about some parts of the local content legislation and whether they breach existing trade treaties that Guyana is a party to.
In sports, Jamaica ensured that their unsuccessful 2022 World Cup campaign did not end without a home win to celebrate. The Reggae Boyz closed the final round with a 2-1 win over Las Catrochas Wednesday night at the National Stadium, giving interim head coach Paul Hall his first win since taking over the team in December. While Honduras took the lead thanks to an Angel Tejeda penalty in the 18th minute, first half goals from Leon Bailey in the 39th minute and Ravel Morris in the second minute of first half stoppage were enough for their first win at the National Stadium. Jamaica ended their campaign in 6th place with 11 points. It's done and dusted, the Apex Test Series, and the West Indies has won 1-0. Former West Indies cricketer Philo Wallace shared his thoughts on the series and the outcome.
West Indies have just beaten England in the Apex Test Series in the Caribbean, 1 test match to 0. They played 3 test matches. The first was in Antigua at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium, and that was a drawn game. West Indies obviously fighting really well. They went to Kensington Oval, Bridgetown, Barbados. Another drawn game, West Indies being led by Captain Craig Brathwaite in the first innings, batting over 450 balls to get over 160. And in the second innings, had to fight his way up to a dogged 50 to secure a draw where England were looking for a victory. And then they went to the Spice Isle and they batted upon a spice pitch. Not a lot of spice, just enough to keep the taste buds interested. And the West Indies bowlers did enjoy it. And they rattled England for less than 215 in the first innings. And then West Indies obviously battled to a lead of 93 in their first innings, and then shut out England for a very low score in the second, and the rest is history. West Indies been in that Apex Series 1-0. The first time the Richards Botham Trophy was unveiled. It was unveiled in Antigua before the first test match. And it's rightly fitting that Richards Botham Trophy remains in Antigua. So West Indies have drawn first blood of that to retain that trophy, and let's hope that they continue to do that. I think the series have generated a lot of interest back in West Indies cricket. We saw the fans in Grenada, and these are the local fans coming out and supporting West Indies cricket. We didn't see a lot in Antigua and Barbados, but I know the support would have been there. But the Grenadians did come out in their numbers, and they showed to the world that they're still part of West Indies cricket. West Indies cricket is still part of them. And when we win, we know how to celebrate and dance.
Wallace took issue with the new way of preparing the pitches.
I think that when you look at it, the preparation has changed, Andrew. When I used to play, they used to vet and roll the pitch, and you used to pull the roller. All you see is these motorized rollers on the surfaces. I used to see the guys cross rolling the pitch and spinning the roller on the pitch when it started to get firm. But now there's so much science that goes into preparing a pitch. I think that sometimes we need to go back to basics and bring in some of those basic methods of preparing, mixed with a little science, and let's see what we have.
Philo Wallace was speaking with Line and Lens host Andrew Seeley. And with that, we call an end to today's newscast. On behalf of our entire news production team, thank you so much for watching.